Hello, and welcome to everyone dialing in for the Digital Transformation What's Next webinar. My name is Jonathan. I'm the organizer of today's panel, and in a moment, I'll be handing over to David Dalton. Just a note on timekeeping, we'll be ending the webinar at 4:45, at which time we'll be heading over to the Digital Hangout for some more Q&A with all of you lovely audience members. So at the end, we'll also have some Q&A, but without further ado, over to you, David.
Thanks, John. I guess the term digital transformation has been a buzzword for many years now. Many leaders have talked it up, describing it as vital to their firm's success and even survival. Given the impact of the COVID-19 crisis, those words could not be more prophetic. Today, we'll discuss how the experiences of the past few weeks have moved the digital transformation agenda and what's next from a digital transformation perspective. First, just some introductions. I'm David Dalton. I'm a consulting partner with Deloitte, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. I'm joined this afternoon by Carl Turnbull, who is Head of Banking Services and Financial Institutions at Starling Bank, Magic Salata, who is Consulting Director at Comark, and Ron Kursick, who is an Enterprise Architect with ING. A little bit more on me. I lead our financial services industry practice in Ireland. I also lead our investment management sector for North-South Europe. And as I have a passion for disruptive technologies, I lead our EMEA blockchain lab, which is based in Dublin as well. Carl has spent over 2 decades in senior positions working for a variety of financial institutions as a cash management sales leader and coverage professional with consultative global client solutions experience. Most recently, he has led regional teams responsible for client transition and exit wind down of the RBS international business within the UK, Ireland, and EMEA for both cash and trade. He describes his key ability as to unlock opportunities in stagnant markets and industry sectors, transforming them into major generators of value. So I think come with the air, come with the man. Magic is Consulting Director at Comark, a provider of innovative software and IT services for financial institutions worldwide. Magic has focused his career on helping banks drive innovation, explore new revenue opportunities, lower operating costs, and improve user experiences, specifically in the areas of digital banking for corporate and SME customers. And having been in software development, project management, and consulting within top banks for a period of 11 years, he will have great insights into today's topic and discussion. Ron is a full-stack creative technologist who leads emerging areas that will be the next points of intersection of business, technology, and innovation. He's involved in transforming the bank and practically applying market paradigms and technology trends as they emerge to help create new business models and matching organization designs. He acts as a trusted advisor to business and IT leaders, providing insights, perspectives, and key principles and frameworks to support innovation. Good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome to this panel. Thank you for taking part. A quick note to the audience, this webinar is being recorded. You can enter any questions you have into the chat area within the GoToWebinar side panel. To start this afternoon, I'm just going to give a brief overview on the topic. I'll then ask the panelists a series of questions on the future of digital transformation within their own organizations and their views on the issues from their respective positions. We will have time at the end, I hope, for audience questions. So if you have any, please submit into the question form provided by GoToWebinar. We'll then sum up with a closing comment each. So that's the kind of the format. Maybe just to kind of kick off the topic, I guess, faced with the current situation, firms across probably every industry have had no choice but to accelerate their transformation plans. I know personally from talking to some of my banking clients, they've kind of witnessed a massive, pretty much overnight shift in their operating model. And you see that, I guess, in a number of dimensions. Customers have gone completely digital, effectively overnight. And that's both an opportunity and a challenge, I guess, for banks. Opportunity to try and lock in the savings associated with that. Business continuity has been tested in a way no, I think, organization ever expected, with thousands or probably tens of thousands of employees having to work from home, work remotely. We've certainly seen, and again, some of the things that have come up in conversation have been different ways of working. So particularly for large banks that tend to be bureaucratic and slow to make things happen, they've really become a lot more agile, solution focused, and being able to get things done. So ways of working has kind of changed quite a lot. And fundamentally, there's an expectation that everything now must be digital, actually. I was just talking a little bit earlier with some of the panel members and just saying, given the implications of the COVID-19 crisis, are we going to witness the Carlota Perez effect, who's an economist who studies kind of the adoption of emerging and disruptive technologies? And basically, her perspective says that some of these disruptive technologies require, a deep recession, a deep crisis to be adopted to force organizations to think more radically and try things very, very different than they're used to. So we might explore some of that as we go through today's sessions. So firstly, let me kick off with a question, the first question, which is, how well prepared from a digital transformation perspective were your firms, and share your views on the broader marketplaces for the implications of what's happened? What's worked well, what has not worked well? Carl, I'll get you to start on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, David. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. So look, having spent many years across global institutions, some with sort of very, very complex legacy systems, to move into Starling a year ago was very interesting, and particularly given the current environment that we're in. So I think if we look at Starling specifically, being a sort of digital-only bank, Starling's essentially placed digital at the heart of the business, literally from day one. That's what Anne Bowden set out to do. She's a technology engineer at heart, so digital is really at the heart of everything that we do. So we haven't essentially needed to go on any kind of transformational journey to survive, which some of the other banks perhaps have had to have done very, very quickly. We set out to change the way that banking was traditionally done by taking a digital-first approach. So that's really much in our DNA. So digital is embedded in our technology and our culture, which we feel is extremely important. And it's primarily focused on giving the customer the best possible banking experience. If we look at retail and SMEs, we've helped institutional firms on their own digital transformation journeys too, through B2B banking services, with various use cases from sort of lending right through to payment. So the full kind of client experience through retail, SMEs and institutional. At the moment, I think effective digital services are very much in the need to help businesses and individuals who are facing new realities. Clearly, what we're going through at the moment, and many businesses are themselves turning to digital to survive, as you've already alluded to, David. And I think it's very important that the banks, certainly Starling, are there to support them.
And Carl, have you had any specific challenges, I guess, from this probably greater digital kind of usage uptake, specifically as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, specifically in the lending space. So Starling was, I think, in the second wave of the CBIL lending program. So we've had to very, very quickly build those lending products. And when you're thinking about building something from scratch, designing the product through to the process, the administration, the credit analysis, the actual lending capability, and the decisions are wrapped around that. So if you think from that perspective, and then also more recently the bounce back, which is literally a product that we've had to have built in the last couple of weeks, I don't see any other bank that I've worked for historically that would have been able to have turned around a product so quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting that your agile culture basically allows you to be able to respond that quickly. We'll come back to that point a little bit later, I think.
Yeah, and I think, but then I think some of the challenges is from a priority perspective that, suddenly we have to redeploy engineers and technologists into areas that, perhaps they were working on something else for a different industry sector. So I think the challenge is priorities, but again, putting the customer at the heart of the conversation, and in terms of everything that we do, the lending program at the moment is top priority.
Thanks, Carl. Magic, what's your thoughts on this?
When we are talking about the preparation for the digital transformation, I'll first tell you my perspective from Comarch. So we are quite a big company with over 6,000 employees, and we were digital from the beginning. We of course had business continuity plan for this, but it's like in this joke, right? You've probably seen it, like who was responsible for digital transformation at your company? Was it the CEO, the CIO, or COVID-19? So you can see that nobody actually expected it to happen. So suddenly we are in this situation where we had to execute this plan for remote work. And there were, of course, some location-related activities like server maintenance that we couldn't just move. But we were able to move 95% of employees to working remotely within just 7 days. And the biggest challenge that we had was using some kind of VPN access to company resources. So the solutions that we found were rather costly, so we managed to actually whip up our own one, and we ended up saving millions on this one. So this enabled the switch for us, so we could service our clients without any hiccups. And this was just our part. And this situation has also impacted the way we work with our clients. Some of them were less digitalized, some of them were more digitalized. But there was one key component that allowed us to get through this crisis together. So at Comarch, when we work with our clients, we always have dedicated teams allocated to the client projects. And with most clients, we work in what is called agile way. So we make decisions. Again, this is something that was already mentioned by Carl. Right? So we make decisions about priorities together on the spot. And this is a crucial element in times of crisis, to not have this inertia or this kind of indecisiveness. And such a way of working has helped us tremendously. So one example I can give you is an implementation of anti-crisis shield. Because in Poland, this is a government-planned initiative, so it's a kind of financial aid for SMEs in times of crisis. So the banks were mandated to enable applications for such funding using their digital access channels, which we provide for their SME and corporate clients. Of course, nobody was prepared for this beforehand. But thanks to this agility, we were able to shift priorities in a blink of an eye. So the projects themselves, even if they were not trivial, we're able to get them up and running very quickly. So for example, in one bank, we did it in just 10 days from concept to reality. So getting back to the question, how it impacted our work with our clients, if there's one thing that I can say helped us and our clients at the same time, this was this close cooperation and agile thinking. So the impact of the crisis for us was actually a sign that in terms of digital transformation, agile was the way to go. So essentially, we just got confirmation that we are doing things right.
Thanks, Magic. Ron, I might move on to you. Be really interested in your perspective working with obviously a very large global bank.
Yeah, and also the word transformation in digital transformation, right? It's a word we fling around quite easily, but let's face it, it's only a transformation if it changes the lives of the customers, right? The people at the receiving end of our digital tools. And in terms of what has worked or what has massively surprised me is actually proof that, and not only ING, but also other banks, especially in the Netherlands, because that's where I'm based, is that the banks themselves have now become a digital infrastructure. So I see all the various tools and services that the banks have put out being used in massively creative ways, right? For instance, a QR code to initiate a payment request. I never saw QR codes that much in my life before the virus, but nowadays, every time I open a door for an order or what have you not, somebody puts his or her phone on the ground with a QR code on that phone, which I scan, take a step back from that phone again, and the payment is done. So this little dance seems to be popping up, and it is really the creativity of people who already were digital or have been going digital. So the use of digital banking services as an infrastructure for, in the end, new behavior is massively interesting to see how that is panning out. I never thought that we were actually that digitally transformed already, and I'm trying to inject a bit of a positive note in this whole crisis, of course. But another aspect that we actually witnessed, and my previous peers already alluded to that one as well, is that you now see that what's the backup plan for having an office, right? What do you do when you can't convene with all your colleagues and peers en masse, hundreds and sometimes even 1,000 people in one physical location? What happens if a very large part of the organization has to work from home, or at least not in the office? So the strain on the infrastructure and actually scrambling our agile teams not to focus only on customer problems and customer solutions, but also work on employee problems and employee solutions. That's well, not maybe an eye-opener, but that is certainly a call to arms for employee experience as well, next to customer experience. Because now you need to enable all your colleagues and peers in the same way you would enable your customers in a digital fashion. So trying to find out our new way of working based on agile principles in a more digital manner. For sure, that took some effort, time, energy, and attention. And one of my key takeaways going forward when we find a new form is really to weave in the aspect of employee experiences much more in my work and recommendations.
Thanks, Ron. And I definitely kind of see a lot of similarity in some of my other banking clients to some of the points you've raised there. Just moving on, I think as we talked a little bit about, up until now, but given this crisis that has happened and the impacts that we've seen, what are the kind of changes, replanning that your firms are doing, or you advocate firms to do, over the next kind of 30, 60, 90 days? What are the kind of the priority areas? What are the immediate priority areas that you think firms or your firm are focused on? Magic, I might start with you on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing that we have actually noticed is that our banking clients notice a strong change in the direction from where digitalization was driven. So previously, there were the banks themselves pushing those things, and this was mainly to lower costs and boost profits. But after the pandemic, the things have changed. So now it was about the clients wanting to use digital channels, requesting some specific features because they really needed access to banking and didn't really want or couldn't go outside anymore. So apart from giving this digital access, banks needed to face a surge in the number of online users. An example from one of our clients is the rise of users of sophisticated banking products, like, for example, trade finance solutions. So traditionally, these were the types of applications that clients preferred to fill out in person, even though everything was already available through digital channels. But the need to adapt to the situation forced those clients to try the digital version. And to their surprise, they started preferring it to the offline one. So this is also a phenomenon that many companies in other industries have to face, the rising number of online users. And for that, they need some specific tools, like, for example, video chats or even fully automated chatbots to support this new wave of entrance into the digital world. So they need solutions that can not only be adapted to increased needs, but also deployable quickly. And when you want to deploy something quickly, you usually reach for an off-the-shelf solution. Thus, the attitude of companies has changed from demanding a perfect, all boxes ticked solution from the start to deploying something that works very well in the beginning and then can be perfected later on. So this is again about this business agility that I've been talking about before, deploying something minimal that serves the customers at an adequate level, because you first need to survive, and this is a much more basic need. So you'd rather deploy some solution quickly than wait for it to become the fulfillment of your dreams. And when it comes to digital transformation in this context, you should find proper tools to digitalize the whole client lifecycle whenever possible, starting with digital onboarding with features like remote identification, support for electronic signatures, and so on. Then moving on to properly serving your clients by allowing them to monitor progress using digital channels or use any support services like video chats. So there are many off-the-shelf solutions, of course, available in these categories. But if you want to be even quicker to start using one, you should consider using the cloud. So as an example from Comarch, we've had great success with our ERP systems, which are cloud-based, that they are readily integrated with webshop platforms and banking systems. And this enables clients to start using not just one application, but the whole ecosystem. So My advice, if you want to go digitally quickly, just look at the off-the-shelf solutions or cloud systems. But also when considering a solution, take a broader look and see if it's a part of a bigger ecosystem that may help you thrive in the future. Because this is an investment that will definitely pay off. And this is something that can be done immediately to ensure that you have a future.
Thanks, Magic. Ron, what are your thoughts on this?
I think I have more or less an answer in the same direction, in the sense that my recommendation would be let your customers show the way, right? And whether it's individuals or commercial organizations, large enterprises, small enterprises, they are all innovating out of necessity massively nowadays, right? And they are really figuring out what the next wave of innovation should be. Like the example of how people are using QR codes. For sure, there's inspiration in there how to, well, optimize, operationalize, take the friction out of those kind of things. But the ideas are brought by the customers. Yesterday, I saw an example of, and it's not just an idea, it's going to be in production, of a 3D printer specifically intended to print cards from WhatsApp messages. So elderly people who are getting a WhatsApp message from their grandchildren, maybe they are not all that digitally and would like to receive it on their phone, they can actually get a print from the WhatsApp in a card form. I think that's a brilliant idea. It would be a brilliant but maybe silly idea a couple of months ago, and these things are now popping up. So I'm really curious what our customers are coming up with in terms of innovating and finding their way, their new form in the current context. Another one I would be really interested in, and we have to probably wait more than just 30 or 60 days, and that's maybe the changing stance of regulators. If you see how European regulators are changing their tone and tech on, well, the typical big tech organizations, right? That they're now actually wanting to work with the Googles and the Apples of this world instead of, well, seeing them as anti-competitive entities for right and for wrong. So the whole perception in there of the role of technology, and especially large-scale technology, almost at an infrastructural level, is changing as well. So I for sure will keep an eye on the changing narrative and tone of the regulators.
Ron, there's some great points there. Can I just go back to the customer one? I really think that's really interesting. Like, I'd be interested to see how you listen to customers in this environment. Is that through social listening? Are there particular techniques or things that you're doing to kind of get those insights from customers? What are you doing with respect to that?
No, oh yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I wished I had a really worked out methodology to actually deal with that one, because it just took me totally by surprise. So what I'm doing, and the small team I'm part of is doing, is we read pretty much every newspaper and every publication, and you see these things popping up in the strangest of places, right? The thing is, you see digital and digital transformation popping up in contexts that were never thought as digital or transformational. So you really have to look beyond your current or your previous sources. So now just having an open eye and being curious on everything you see. That's not really an answer, I know, but this is just a totally different way, for me at least, at understanding innovation.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ron. Carl, just interested in your perspective from a Starling Bank perspective.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, some initial priorities, clients focusing an awful lot on business continuity planning, clearly, significant requests around that. So, as a kind of startup, you know, we have all this stuff for the bank, but we've had to begin kind of crafting specific specific pieces of work for industry segments and clients, which has been interesting. Clients looking for contingency providers for payment services as well. So whilst we saw this kind of consolidation of providers over the last few years, we've now seen this more of a decentralized approach, so that there isn't such a concentration of risk on one provider. Now that could have been because of a change in strategy of a global bank over the last few years, and therefore, from a regional perspective, clients have felt more comfortable having a couple of providers. I think given how the banks have responded to such a pandemic, which probably didn't feature in original BCP planning, it's quite interesting to see now we've had a flurry of activity in terms of folks wanting to connect to us for payment services. And through APIs, that's a much, much quicker connectivity and process rather than using a host-to-host or some of the other types of connectivity. So we've seen a significant increase in that. And I think we'll see more of that as time goes on, where folks want a contingency provider or, frankly, an ability to be able to swift different pipes with different providers to make sure that they're covered per currency. But for Starling, I think Starling also from an employee point of view, I know that the other panelists have mentioned that, but despite being a very technical, technology-led bank, we still had an awful lot of people based physically in London in two other centres as well. But we've frankly seen over the last few weeks that pretty much 99.9% of our staff have worked remote, and we've continued to keep the bank running and continuing to build products, which has been really interesting. So I suspect there'll be some very quick decisions made in terms of whether the old model needs to continue or not. As also has been mentioned already, the customer is absolutely the centre of everything that we do. So any kind of change in strategy, product or investment always takes into account the needs and the effects on the end customer. Talking about that releasability in terms of quick time to market of products, we released a connected card for retail clients during this crisis. I think one or two other banks have done that as well, to allow friends and family to go shopping for others and being able to sort of load up a specific card to allow that to happen. So really looking at those helpful products and services that can be brought to market very, very quickly to satisfy a specific customer need, dependent, in response to a specific situation, which is what we're seeing now. And I think, frankly, Starling, look, we're lucky. We've only been running for 4 years. We were kind of built for this specific environment and this specific situation. As said already, the ability to take staff and run the bank remotely has just been phenomenal. I mean, that happened very, very quickly, pretty much overnight. And the ability to still respond to clients and market requests for, the build and offering of specific products has been evidenced in what I've talked about already.
And Carl, just to maybe go back on that customer point that I was talking to Ron about, and just given exactly what you just said there, have you seen a more experimental approach, I guess, to innovating new things as a result of the crisis? Typically, kind of product development, new releases tend to be can take quite a long period of time. Do you think there's kind of a more experimental approach taken to how to introduce new things from a customer perspective?
Yeah, I think so. That's more in terms, it's a good question. I think experimental more in terms of the actual product that perhaps we wouldn't have thought of before, or wouldn't have thought that there would have been a need for. But I think the speed at which Starling kind of agrees the idea and then executes and implements in time to market is just significantly quicker than anywhere I've worked before. And I've kind of worked in some very large global institutions, so you would absolutely expect that. But to actually be a part of that and see that is quite frankly quite amazing.
Thanks, Carl. So taking a slightly kind of longer term perspective, how does this crisis impact on the digital transformation fundamentals? What does the new transformation look like? What do we need to relearn, reboot? Ron, I might start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I can't help but think that much of the changes in behavior, be it customers, be it individuals, be it regulators, much of those changes have been waiting to happen anyways, right? So there's almost this pent up lake of changes coming, and it just now accelerating. And I also keep thinking right after the dot-com bubble, right, at the early 2000s, when all these things blew up, and we were left with this amazing investment in all that infrastructure and all that optic fiber that wasn't used anymore, right? The dark fiber. But it's that investment coming out of that crisis that has been powering, well, the very high throughput backbone of the internet we have been enjoying for the past decade. So what will be the investment in a next generation infrastructure that we will leave this crisis with? If you look at the Apple and Google liaison, right, on the basically on tracking infrastructure embedded in both iOS and Android. That's a liaison you couldn't see coming half a year ago. And what can you build on that one once we leave this crisis behind us? This week, I believe, Jeff Bezos says that Amazon would commit to invest all the $4 billion positive cash flow that they would have generated in Q2 back as an investment to their infrastructure, right? That's $4 billion just strengthening Amazon as an infrastructure. So it's the for sure the fundamental that is changing is the breadth and the depth of an infrastructure that's available to all of us as in the companies we represent, but all of us as individuals, all of us as consumers, but all of us as creators, right? That's the bit I referred to earlier, that our customers are now innovators in their own right. So this change in infrastructure, I think that one will be the game changer. We will maybe do another panel in another year.
Thanks, Ron. Magic, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so what we are talking about right now essentially is a global change of behavior. So according to some studies, right, it may require just 3 months to change a habit, like, for example, the difficult ones, like quitting smoking, like taking exercises in the morning. So as time passes, it's definitely gonna be interesting to see the changes in the way people behave, especially when it comes to using those digital tools. And for some, it may be difficult, and others will just adapt to new reality and they will appreciate on how convenient it is, even if they miss their morning commute so much. So I'm pretty sure we will see some interesting developments in the way the people approach work. On example of Comarch, we were more of a traditional company when it comes to working remotely. So there were a few people working remotely on a regular basis. Now, after all the companies were forced to introduce remote working as a daily habit, it became quite clear that it doesn't reduce productivity. So if introduced on a massive scale, remote working can have a big impact on people as a whole, from reducing time lost on commuting to even designing houses with dedicated working spaces and soundproof rooms. So the ramifications on our usage of digital and on the digital transformation itself, they can be huge. And it will also impact the way we as humans approach digital transformation. So people who have tasted technology, they will want to have more and more of those services available through digital channels. When we are talking about banks, it will mean more digital contact, but it shouldn't mean essentially less personalization. In fact, the digital tools that you are all introducing as part of transformation projects, they should not replace the relationships that you have, but instead make them stronger. So when we are talking about personalization, think about the most personal device that you have in your possession. It's probably your smartphone. And those can be a great beneficiary here, essentially being a computer that is available anywhere and relatively cheap at the same time. We've observed trends like, for example, heavy mobile use, especially in developing countries where people don't have PCs, but do everything using their mobile phones. And what we are facing now is a situation where many people who were previously not fluent in using technical devices are either required to do so or face the risk of catching the virus. So the motivation for people to start using technology is right here. It's just a matter of providing the users with enough security and convenience so that the barrier of entry to the digital world is minimal. So this is again about this user experience that was mentioned several times during this talk. So some digital systems will need to see some redesign in this area to make this experience as frictionless as possible. And it will require more focus on target groups who previously have not been using technology. For example, you need to provide features that are more tailored to your users. In banking, those could be systems like automatic accounting for SME clients and so on. But of course, to enable some completely groundbreaking new practices on a global scale, there will need to be some changes in the global areas that are controlled by governments. Like, for example, introduction of nationwide electronic signature schemes, ability to handle official manners digitally. Because right now, these areas are not that well developed and still require physical contact. So for the sake of all of us working in digital, working in technology companies, working in banks, I hope that such regulations will be introduced to enable development in other areas or just not to block this development. But to summarize predictions, right now, this situation is new for all of us. And as we know from experience, it's often very difficult to understand the full impact of an event, especially such significant as this pandemic. But what we can learn from it already is that physical human contact is not always something that we can rely on. And as such, for businesses that we have, digital transformation is something absolutely essential that needs to happen.
Thanks, Magic. Carl, just turn to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you. I think technology is one point, but I think also culture and leadership play a huge role in sort of creating the right environment. I think it has to be taken holistically. More often than not, requires significant collaboration and action across the entire firm. So we've seen some banks building specific digital banks as separate entities with varying degrees of success, but certainly within Starling, when you have that cultural leadership, which and with the sort of digital and technology in its DNA, then we've really seen that kind of environment thrive and the benefits onto the clients. I think customers expect more, will continue to expect more. I think digital transformation's probably moved beyond the idea of automating specific systems or specific websites. It's certainly morphed into reacting very, very quickly in the market in specific environments and building products. I'm convinced that with the effects of the current pandemic, this will also push and is pushing organizations to use digital as a way to continue servicing or create new ways of servicing. And we're certainly seeing that. I think many banks have had to adapt very, very quickly, as already mentioned, while others have essentially sort of pulled back to rely on their core communication channels. So I think key learnings and new approaches will come from this. As I mentioned before, I think Starling has been very, very well positioned and has been built for it to be able to respond.
Thanks, Carl. Before we go to kind of final comments, I might talk to just John. Is there any questions that have come up?
Hi there, David.
Hi, John.
Yes, we've had a few come over, but I think there's one on agility and compliance that I'd like to present. So a lot of discussion around agility as a key factor to being successful in these times of change has been highlighted across this talk, but how do those within highly regulated industries balance compliance versus agility? And some find it harder to deal with move fast and break things when they're under such scrutiny. Can you talk to that? I believe that might be pointed to Ron there.
Oh.
Ron, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sorry, yeah, it's the no, because I was still a bit stunned about the move fast and break things. Because that's a phrase I really loathe. It's the I can't stand that one. That's not something I can attribute it to you, of course. It's the no. I really don't think that the whole gist of agility is move fast and break things. The whole gist of agility is to have short feedback cycles. That's it. Right? To accept that you are in a complex environment where the relationship between input and output is not known or not sufficiently known. So what you're going to do is you put something out there and you validate your assumptions, and any compliance or any constraint really that's already out there, that is just part of your foundation. It's there, right? It's the whole purpose of agility is not to break things and not even to move fast. The whole point of agility is to learn. And I really think we can still learn on top of compliancy and regulations and other constraints that we have been handed.
Yeah, I can also add something from my perspective, because it's usually the compliance department. These are the guys that put the know in the innovation. And I remember talking a couple of years ago with Alex Carrillas from BBVA Compass, and essentially their approach to innovation was to, first of all, think of some idea, think of something that could be great, and then get the legal team working essentially on making it happen, right? So first have this great idea and then try to fit it into the legal framework. Or sometimes you can even accept the risk of paying some fines if it's something that is actually worth looking into as a business opportunity. So it all depends on the risk appetite, and it all depends on the culture of the company actually. So whether you are more risk averse, then you can try to fit within all the compliance requirements. But sometimes if you want to be the first mover in the market, it's sometimes worth taking some risks.
Thanks,
Great.
Magic.
Sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say we've got a couple of minutes left, so what would be great is just to get one closing comment from Carl, Magic, and Ron. Is there one thing that you'd like the audience to take away from today's discussion? I might start with you, Carl, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to add to the last question in terms of how you actually define success. To some clients of all different varying sizes and complexities, it may just be the ability to reach somebody remotely who has access to information that they need very, very quickly, or to respond to a situation that they're suddenly faced with. So that's quite interesting when you kind of look at the overall products and services that are being developed. It may not need to be too exhaustive. But I think, I just think that we need to be all, certainly in my experience with Starling, it's really all been around the agility and the technology led banks and organizations. Perhaps banks need to be more like a technology firm with a banking license. That could be one way of looking at it. But I think this has been imperative for Starling in responding to the current environment and our success. And for example, talking about the go-to-market products that we've been able to offer and launch very, very quickly in a matter of weeks. I mean, this has been quite phenomenal. So, as I mentioned a couple of times already, I think Starling was built for this.
Thanks, Carl. Magic?
Yeah, so if there's just one thing that the crisis has taught us, is that in order to survive, you just need to act quickly. 5-year plans don't work. It's surely been the truth in the tech industry, but now we see that even something as tiny as a virus can become the end of the world as we know it, and it almost overnight. But just like David mentioned in the beginning, whenever there's a crisis, there are some opportunities. And we see that these opportunities can be leveraged only when we are prepared for them. So even if it wasn't so, digital transformation should be your first priority from now on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Magic. And Ron, just last thought.
Yeah, I think my last thought would fit with that statement. There is this well-known phrase, or I think it's well known, from Mark Andreessen, that software is eating the world, and he coined that phrase. I think it's almost a decade ago. No, but it actually is. It's the actually, and don't want to sound too obnoxious as a tech person, but I think the world is software, or software is the world, right? It's digital technology, digital practices, agility that has a strong background in digital technology is going to be embraced by organizations and people who never considered them to be technology organizations of technologists or even innovators. There won't be back to normal. There will be a new form, and even though I want to call it a new normal, there will be a new form. And the acceptance and the role and the importance of technology and how to transform an organization and culture with technology will take hold and will spread way beyond the typical of the usual suspects. So that would be my closing comment, and I hope it's a positive one.
Thank you, Ron. I think it is. Let me just finish by saying a big thanks to Carl, Magic, and Ron for the panel today. I think they had some great insights, some really interesting thoughts and perspectives, so thank you so much. And with that, I'll hand you back to John.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much, everybody. Just a few notes to close out. To find out more about Ditto and our services, please visit ditto.tv. That's ditto.tv. This session has been recorded, and we'll be sharing the link by email. For more information and to discuss this topic further, please reach out with Ditto at control@ditto.tv. On screen now, you can see the list of events for the rest of the day. We're going to be closing out with just a few more webinars as well. The official charity, as you've heard across the day, is Group Mind. Today has been a free day, people giving their insights and their time. Anything that you can donate would be highly appreciated and make a big difference. As well, we're going to be heading over to the Digital Hangout. So please join us for more conversation at ditto.tv/TCC. Thank you all so much.